Thanks for joining us today. It's gonna be a great day. It's gonna be a great day. Got some great music. I hear DC's busting loose here, So let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. So while you're logging in, please drop your name, the name of your startup, a quick description, what part of the area you're checking in from in chat. We'll get this thing started in a second. See BJ Williams is joining us. Shout out to BJ, shout out to Michael, Anthony, Seth. All right. We're gonna go ahead and get this party started. So I am Joey Womack, founder of Goody Nation. We're a nonprofit located in Atlanta, Georgia, that's focused on closing the relationship gap for tech-focused social entrepreneurs and diverse founders. I'm also I also sit on the board of Venture Atlanta, recently joined this year, where I lead the Diversity and Inclusion Committee. And so what I've noticed over the past few years, and I used to serve on the recruiting and selection committee where I evaluated and voted on many of the applications. There's, in many cases, is a difference between applications and also investor pitches and so on and so forth, sometimes between diverse founders and others. And so we want to have a conversation to talk about how diverse founders can put their best foot forward, showcase how awesome they are, and more importantly, put you in better position to be selected for accelerators, for showcases, and also to receive investment. And so joined by all-star cast today of DC superstars, and look forward to talking about the DC ecosystem, what it means for diverse founders, and then how we can help DC's diverse founders reach their potential. And so quickly, before we go to intros, I want to talk a little bit about Venture Atlanta. Venture Atlanta is the largest investor showcase in the Southeast, if not along the East Coast, focused on roughly 80 companies a year. A few, I'd say 20, 25 or so are those between $0 and $250,000 in revenue. Another level is $250,000 to $2 million. Those get on stage. And then the other is $2 million, $3 million plus. And so our mission this year, Venture Atlanta, is to find the top diverse founders down from DC down to Texas, quite honestly. And this series is a first step in that process. Again, it says Venture Atlanta is in Atlanta. There's a hybrid, there's a virtual version, there's an in-person version. But if we love to see you all apply, we love to see you all get selected. And know if you come to Atlanta for the in-person version, you're going to have a good time. More importantly, you're going to get access to additional resources from top investors from across the country. So it's not necessarily about Venture Atlanta, not about Joey Womack. Let's get to talking about DC. So I'm going to kick it off to Melissa first for an intro, and then we'll go Melissa, Maurice, Oz, and then Jason. Melissa?
Well, thank you so much for having me, Joey. We're always happy to have Atlanta. We do Atlanta, Baltimore, and DC. We got to mash them all up together. My name is Melissa Bradley. I'm based in Washington, DC. I am founder and managing partner of 1863 Ventures, which is an accelerator for what we call new majority entrepreneurs. I'm also a general partner of our 1863 Venture Fund. I'm proud to say I'm also an entrepreneur, so excited to be part of the ecosystem multiple ways. I'm co-founder of venture-backed small business platform called Eureka. And for those who are literally in DC, I'm also a professor at Georgetown. And so hope to see some of y'all on campus or walking in the neighborhood, and great to be here.
Awesome. Maurice?
Hey everybody, I'm Maurice Boissiere. I see some familiar names in here, so good to see that and meet some new folks. I work at an early stage, actually seed stage, so think very beginning, cybersecurity investment firm called Data Tribe. I also teach entrepreneurship at the University of Maryland, and I'm just generally available and interested in helping folks kind of get started. Prior to this, I spent 20 years of my life starting companies or involved in early stage venture-backed companies. So had a ton of practice trying to raise money and operate a company.
Awesome. Oz?
Great, sure. Hey everyone, I'm Oz. I'm an investor at Revolution Growth. So Revolution more broadly is a multi-stage venture capital firm. So we have a a seed fund called Rise of the Rest and a venture fund that's mostly Series A companies, and I'm on the growth team. So for us, that's Series B or Series C and beyond. We focus on consumer and enterprise businesses using tech or tech-enabled solutions to disrupt big markets outside of Silicon Valley. That's probably the big point there. So always looking for companies in DC. Prior to Revolution, had a tech and investment banking background, and I'm also first generation from Somalia, so have a lot of familiarity with going into spaces where a lot of people don't necessarily look like you. So excited to kind of help with this conversation.
Nice, nice. And then my fellow person with Venture Atlanta, Jason.
Hey, everybody. So I'm Jason Kaplan, a general partner with Bull City Venture Partners, which is a seed and early stage venture capital firm based in Durham. My partner and I have been investing together over the last 20 years through 4 funds up and down the East Coast, kind of Philly down through Atlanta, although about 25% of our fund has been invested in the DC area. So notable exits include companies like Wedding Wire, which we were there. And then we've also invested with Maurice Data Tribe as well, and a company called Attila Security.
Nice, nice, nice. Also here is my good friend. So I'm the president of the David Hartnett fan club. David is with the Metro Atlanta Chamber doing great work, and the Metro Atlanta Chamber is a major partner of Venture Atlanta in this initiative, along with Georgia Power as well. So let's talk about DC. Let's talk about DC. Melissa, I'm going to kick it to you first. What's it like in the DC tech ecosystem? And for clarification purposes, everyone, this is a multi-city tour. We've done Atlanta. Atlanta came out strong out the gate 2 weeks ago. Then we went down to Florida, and Miami was like, "Yo, this is our moment. It's all about it's all about South Florida." Austin yesterday was talking a little bit of trash, saying it's really their moment too. Melissa, what's going on in DC?
Well, there's a lot going on in DC, so I welcome y'all because those 2 places, y'all a little late. Let me just say, if we're gonna start a little healthy competition, I would say that DC, because of the presence of so many universities, has historically been a place for entrepreneurship. In all honesty, it wasn't always a place for Black entrepreneurship. And I think that a lot of times universities overlooked them because they were mostly in Northwest and did not acknowledge the tremendous amount of entrepreneurship that was happening east of the river. Because of a variety of programs that Maurice has been a part of, I've been a part of, we've started, there's a tremendous amount of entrepreneurship that is now blossoming across the city. I think like most Black communities, think about Tulsa, just celebrating the 100th anniversary. Southeast DC was always the hotbed of activity, whether it was a side hustle, throwing waters at a car, to owning the storefronts that are the Black bodegas, because there is no grocery store, to now grocery businesses and ghost kitchens and a lot of others. I think that has always been on the rise, and I think the spotlight has now started to be shown. I think money has started to flow into that community, but I think we need to remember that DC, because it is Chocolate City, and I'm going to hang on to that, has always been a place of entrepreneurship because that's what Black people do. I think the mayor and her offices of DEMPET and others have done a really good job over the past few years of trying to get more money to these entrepreneurs, because the reality is most of the investments, no disrespect to Revolution, but most of the investments came from Virginia and that road to Dulles Airport. And those were mostly white firms run by white men. No disrespect, Jason, but they were not looking for folks looking like me. And so I do think that there's also now been a wave of investors who are based here, who are looking to invest here. We're here at ATC3. We've got a whole Black VC DMV chapter that Maurice is leading, and you see them coming out. So I think entrepreneurship is on the rise. The one thing I would say, though, is that because this is historically a government town, we have what we call federal city and then like the real DC, that you do have entrepreneurs who I think are flourishing. But if I can be honest, they probably took them a lot longer than if they had been somewhere else. We've got April Johnson on the phone, who is just killing it with her business. I see Tammy Garcia, who's killing it with her business. And I think you find a majority of the business owners, not surprisingly, are Black women. But because of the lack of supports and because for so long the focus is on federal, they have made it by bootstrapping and hanging on. And now, hopefully, finally, this is their moment to have folks recognize their talent and potential.
I love it. I love it. Maurice, you want to chime in?
Yeah, not a lot to add to what Melissa said. I mean, it's definitely, I was an entrepreneur for most of my life there. I see Chris on the phone. He and I can remember back in 2000 when we were raising money for our respective startups and trying to organize the founders of color community. It's been around for a while, and DC as a whole, especially from a tech entrepreneurship lens and a tech venture lens, has kind of gone through its highs and its lows based on AOL kind of graduating people and having a very robust environment. And, we had firms that were doing well, and then they kind of went away. And now we have a new crop or wave of local firms. But one of the interesting things, big differences between being a founder of color in DC now versus before is that you also, DC or the region is not your only stop to find money. Now that the world has been flattened and you can go and talk to people relatively easy in other regions or in California, all that's true. When I, raised money back in 2000, I ended up raising money outside of DC from New York and from California. And I think what we're finding in the DC region is a lot more talent, and then likewise a lot more talent being focused on starting tech entrepreneurship, and a lot, and then I think the money will come in terms of firms in DC and a lot of firms outside of DC looking to DC for its ideas. DC is unique in that when it comes to ed tech. When it used to be telecommunications, but when it comes to ed tech, when it comes to cybersecurity, when it comes to healthcare, there's a lot of unique talent here and unique domain experience required sometimes to start a company.
Nice. Awesome. What's your take?
Sure. I guess I'll just try to layer it on top. Melissa and Maurice both had great points, but just coming back to Melissa's point, just on how it's always been seen as a government first city. I think there are two good developments there. One, because of the moment we're living in now, where I think government stepping in a bit more to support underrepresented businesses in terms of funding. I think it's a good time to be closer to the capital, although you could still worry about being overlooked by government. I think there's a recognition that creating startups and creating small business jobs are a priority to kind of level the playing field. And I think it's an interesting moment for that reason. And then also just from a more, I guess, a different take, a broader market perspective, a lot of the businesses that are being created nowadays touch the real world. They're not just software. And so there's been a recognition that policy does matter and government does matter to being successful. So I think you're seeing a lot more cooperation. So all the biggest companies are opening up offices in DC, being very, practical about managing those relationships. So that spells, more jobs here, more economy, and hopefully more companies being created because of it. So really, really excited from that market perspective.
Nice. And before we dig a little bit deeper into the diverse founder experience, Jason, I want to talk a little bit about your take on DC. Why it's important for you. You mentioned you've made some investments there. You go from Philly, and obviously the Hawks just beat Philly, so let's be real here. All the way down to Atlanta. But what are you seeing? What do you see in terms of the DC area, their opportunities, strengths, things of that nature?
I think what DC has that no other market that we cover really does well is, and something that makes DC a little more unique, is how welcoming it is. So, I think when I go to other markets, sometimes I feel like sometimes the other investors may have like sharp elbows a little bit. But DC, like the angel investors there, the other like venture funds there are very welcoming. So when we first started our efforts, it was like red carpet treatment. So it's like, hey, let us introduce you to other entrepreneurs here, other people you should know. And I think that approach is something that we try to copy for other investors that come and visit us in North Carolina. So I've kind of learned from that, that really good, I don't know how to put it, maybe like really good hospitality or whatever, or really good approach. I don't know. It's really good behavior. And, you look at, and I think I want to kind of hammer home Maurice's point from earlier too, is like, you look at North Carolina as, my home state, over 80% of the capital that gets invested here comes from outside of our region. So DC, I know a lot of other funds that would love to do more deals in DC. And yeah, some of the funds there may have gone away. There are others that are still writing checks, obviously, like Revolution, which is fantastic, a fantastic firm. So, but I do think that there's a real thirst for other funds outside the area to do more deals, and frankly, and there's also another thing too. I think is important, and there's a lot of firms that are maybe out in the Bay Area where they may have a partner or two that are from the DC area. And I know there's there's a partner at Excel, for example. He went to Georgetown, his family's still in DC. He would love to find a DC deal. So I think, looking for that connection too would be helpful for founders.
Nice.
Can I just say to that though, quickly, Jason? I mean, I think what's interesting about DC, because I've been here off and on since 1985. I think that's the uniqueness about DC. It's a place people come leave, come back to, I think, but it's always a place that people call home. And so I just love that Jason talked about the person in Cali who wants to do a DC deal. I think that is unique about DC, right? Like, I'm originally from New York, and so like New York is the place, but there is an embracement of anybody who's been in DC as part of the larger membership and citizenry. And so I do think it's cool that any of us can pick up the phone of somebody who lived in DC who's now in Chicago or is now in California, and there is still such a strong affinity for whatever reason, whether they were here when it was Marion Barry's time, whether they were here for something else that happened, there is a strong affinity to DC. And it's awesome because, to Jason's point, people still feel some kind of connection.
I love it. No, that's awesome. I mean, DC does feel like home. My wife's worked there, so I don't. Okay, this has nothing to do with anything. Let's talk about the startup ecosystem a little bit. We talked about, so DC seems awesome for the startup ecosystem. I was visiting with my wife. I went around a little bit. Things seem really cool there. But what does it mean for diverse founders there? What is the support system like? What is capital like? I mean, you all mentioned that you've launched a Black VC chapter in the area. I mean, what is it like for diverse founders?
I can start. Sorry. Well, first of all, I'd probably say, one of the things that is shifting or changing is the idea that, DC is restricted to the 10 by 10 kind of triangle. Like, it really is an ecosystem that spans Baltimore to almost Richmond, but definitely Charlotte. Charlottesville is part of that. So I say it's broader than just the DC, the specific DC metro area. And then, for founders of color, well, like kind of on Melissa's point about it's first and foremost got a robust education system here, a higher education system. So it is not only graduating a lot of diverse founders who stay in the area, diverse talent stay in the area, and then you have the people coming in to work for this. Right now, we'll say, sort of even the government-driven ecosystem and the people who support that, which is also becoming a very heavy tech sort of ecosystem. So first and foremost, you've got a lot of people of color starting companies. And other thing I'd say is they're not necessarily starting companies for people of color, like some are, but it's a broad kind of sets of company because you've got a lot of diverse experiences that aren't just about being Black. So you got like Chris starting a fintech company. April has a phenomenal virtual events company. You've got people just doing a lot of interesting things. The big thing here is really access to capital. I think that goes, everybody will say, look, raising money at an early stage is hard, right? Like whether you're selling the dream before you kind of get traction, or even when you're in your early stages of traction, it's hard. And it's harder if you're a founder of color, because I think people are becoming more maybe aware of any sort of biases they may have. It still exists. And it's still hard for a founder of color. But DC has a vibrant startup ecosystem. And I think we're getting the money game together in terms of founders having access to capital locally, because early stage founders in general, early stage investors in general don't typically invest far from home. Because those companies are still so young and sort of fragile, and often require a lot of sort of hand-holding. That if you invest far, that's you can't be as responsive as you want to be. That changes somewhat, but like Jason, I think you were talking about like Samir at Excel, who's from here and has done several deals here. But like, they usually do them at a later stage when they come in. So
Different person.
Huh?
Different person. So there's
All right.
two. Yeah, different person.
Yeah. Samira has done a ton of cyber deals here. So that said, I think the DC ecosystem is really ripe for talent and for companies that are being driven by that talent. And we just got to get more early stage capital here for them.
Nice. And Oz, I want to kick it to you for your thoughts, and then we have a question from the audience. I believe it's Leah. I apologize if I mispronounced the name. Oz?
Yeah, sure. So the only point I was going to make was we had discussed earlier that the whole branding around DC as having mostly cybersecurity companies, or whether it's ed tech companies. I think that's one thing that's hopefully starting to change. One, because you can raise capital from anywhere, and then two, there are companies like, at least that Revolution's involved with, whether they're FrameBridge or HomeSnap, a couple of other companies, where there's proof that you can build a consumer type business here, or a different industry, whether it's consumer or not. And I think oftentimes with diverse founders, more often than not, you'll see they're building solutions to problems in their community, which often aren't cybersecurity issues or whatever it may be. So I think as you start to develop more of that reputation to have an opportunity in DC to build companies that are important to you and your community, then it'll be a natural sort of growth in terms of having more diverse founders being able to scale here. So I'm super excited about that.
Nice. Leah, do you want to take yourself off mute? And
I just learned that there's a lawyer hand feature. Hi, everyone. My name is Leah Cruzy. I'm co-founder of a company called Invest America. We're setting out to eliminate student loan defaults. So we're fintech and insurtech. My co-founder is Black. He's New York based. I am mixed race, Asian American and Caucasian, based here in DC. I live on Capitol Hill. And we are getting to know, so we are kind of split between two different cities and two different markets. What we're finding is a strength of DC is what Melissa had spoken to, is both, there's like two sides of the same coin. It is a challenge in that we've had this two city of the federal city and the real DC. A strength of it is having the access to the kind of knowledge base at the federal level of basically some of the smartest people in the country and world on certain big pictures, policy matters, but then also have access to people who are living and solving problems and challenges in their own neighborhood. One challenge that we are finding, and it's hard not to separate our profiles from a challenge, is as an insurtech, there's a really high barrier to entry. And while we are bringing a very new idea to the insurtech space, and we know that there are competitors in the fintech side, but not insurtech side, because it's a highly regulated market. Even firms that present as excited about entrepreneurs of color, women entrepreneurs, to be able to generate traction in a highly regulated space, it requires licensure, but you have to be backed by a big insurance carrier. It just seems like it's the same old story again and again. And we will succeed. We're raising what we need, and we're being really smart and lean, and we have the right kind of approach. But still, how can others join us, and how can we build up others given the high regulatory barriers and the understandable kind of pattern recognition that VCs, even those who are trying to disrupt these cycles, make it possible for them?
yeah, I don't know if anyone wants to.
I would say there's two answers to that. I think I've had the privilege, or not so much, serve in two presidential administrations. So I think one, Isabel at the SBA is really trying to reimagine what can be done to small businesses. We were on a program the other day, and I think that she recognized she has a very short window of time to, not intentional because it's the federal government, but kind of blow things up. She recognizes that there's been real barriers around how SBA is deploying money. And obviously Biden has made a significant allocation to be approved to support historically overlooked and disadvantaged entrepreneurs through ecosystem or entrepreneurial support organizations. So I think that's one area, is to talk to her team, and I'm happy to make a connection. The other is the Department of Commerce. So I used to serve on the Federal Council of the National Advisory Council for Innovation Entrepreneurship. And we had actually, prior to the past president, put together a toolkit, kind of like innovation sandbox, particularly for entrepreneurs of color, to be able to navigate regulatory concerns. It is still there. It is sitting there. Nothing has happened with it. And so as someone I know now is over that organization at Commerce, that's another opportunity that many of us who were part of NACI are pushing forward. I would say, to the extent that the local organizations can be helpful, I would say that DEMPED and certainly civil leadership there, particularly Sabangale, is really trying to think about, you have the council and others really thinking about, and DSLB thinking about money part. DEMPED is trying to think about the policy part. And so to the extent that there are some levers that the local city can play, then I would highly encourage you to reach out to Sabangale at DEMPED to be able to help you there.
Thank you.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And great question. Let's talk a little bit about, as we shift to the second part of the conversation, around creating momentum for diverse founders. And so for example, this can happen in a few different ways, right? You can pitch a capital provider verbally. You can have a pitch deck. You can do a written application to get into Accelerator. In some cases, you do a written application to get into the pipeline for a capital provider as well. Let's talk about how diverse founders in particular can get your attention. We've seen in other markets, y'all, people talk about confidence a lot. People talk about imposter syndrome for diverse founders. Before we talk about tactics, are you all seeing any of this, or are there any other things you're seeing around trends relative to diverse founders in DC?
I'd say, at least for me, I could jump in. It's part of the problem is because diverse founders haven't raised, at least in my seat, venture capital before. They're not always as aware of how the venture capital model works. And so because a venture fund wants to find companies that may be high risk, but need to have the ability to potentially return a whole fund. And so that means like you make enough money off one investment that you've covered all of the money you've raised from your investors. And when you know that sort of fact in the back of your mind, you then understand what types of opportunities that venture capitalists are looking for. So then to be able to think about that front of mind when you pitch them and make it clear that it's a big market you're going after, or if you solve the problem that you'd like to, the company can be worth a lot, then that's sort of like a gating item to even entertain the conversation. And so it's not that I see the issue all the time, but because there's less of a history of raising venture capital, understanding sort of that mental model that they use when they're looking at companies is really important to sort of garnering their interest.
Nice. Are there any examples of people who've done this well? And so for context, I was mentioned earlier, Barry Givens, Collab Capital, Techstars, mentioned when the first time he saw Jewel Burke-Solomon pitch, and what she said was she gave a personal story about her grandfather experiencing a problem around replacement parts. She tied that to her experience working in corporate at a company focused on replacement parts. She also then mentioned Google. Then she talked about her solution, and that was just boom. It drove everyone. It was a combination of personal, like the great emotional connection, personal story, domain expertise. After that, everything was gravy. So, do you all have any examples? Melissa, I'll kick it to you first. Any examples of founders who do a great job in getting your attention?
So a couple of things. I want to just piggyback on what Oz said. I mean, I also think, because I don't want people to think like folks aren't ready here in DC. I also have to remind folks that 70% of all Black entrepreneurs are not in the tech space, right? I mean, we are not in that space for a variety of reasons, good, bad, and indifferent. And so I do think that there is a learning curve for entrepreneurs who aren't in that tech space to go over to venture. I would also say personally, I think sometimes people run after venture for all the wrong reasons, because it's not right for every single business. So I say that because I think that there are some really great entrepreneurs in DC who are not in the tech space, who unfortunately I think find themselves having to bend over backwards to act like they're in the tech space when they're not, and still can't get money regardless. So I think that that's an issue. So one other trend I want to note is that, because I think this will play into tips, is my observation, not official, not data proven, but most of the entrepreneurs we see are Black women. And that just lends itself to a whole bunch of other problems, because we are not seen on the other side of the table, whether we're talking to a bank, whether we're talking to a CDFI, whether we're talking to a VC. So I do think that there are areas where, when you talked about that confidence and imposter syndrome, I find that there are amazing Black women entrepreneurs in this region who struggle to get money, like a Tammy Garcia, who is running an amazing multicultural platform called Multilingua, who's been at it for years and who has been in several programs and still can't get people to write the check. And so I think that that's a challenge. You have somebody who is in the DMV, which is Mukami, who has developed an AI platform specifically for Black girls, so they can see themselves in the world of gaming and play. And it's taken her literally 5 years to get her product to market. And so I do think this concept of resilience and tenacity and being confident in what you're doing in your idea and not letting somebody else who has no freaking clue about you or your community tell you what to do. I think some of the best pitches I've seen, and I'll give some examples because I think they reside in a bunch of people. I think some of the best pitches I've seen have been people who come with a level of personal connection to the challenge. And that was certainly Tammy, in her having a child who was multicultural and international and recognizing that the school system was not going to support her. I think I've seen, so one is, what's your personal connection? I think two, identifying a market that even if people don't totally get it. And so I think April of Happy was way ahead of her time in terms of, starting out as a platform that would help people have happy hours, and really blossomed because of COVID, which just speaks to the resilience, and pivoted to supporting groups like Black VC, DMV, and others of creating these kits of how do you make the connection. And so I think being able to be firm and staunch, and you seeing something that other people don't see and being able to articulate that. And then the final thing I would just say as a finance person is, please know your numbers. Like I have to say, I don't care what race, gender you are or where you're from. If you do not know your numbers, it's not going to work. Whether I'm a banker, I'm giving you a loan, I'm giving you equity. And I find that there tends to be a level of fear associated with our financial statements. And I think part of it is because it's hard when you're starting from zero to get to $1 million and hoping people believe you. But I think that's something where people have been able to really demonstrate a firm grasp on their numbers, not just for the sake of numbers, but recognize the numbers are nothing but a depiction of both your values and the strategy of which you wish to implement. And it becomes a discussion piece. I think I've seen it, but I wish I saw more of that.
Nice. Maurice?
Yeah, piggybacking on what Melissa said, founder market fit. I mean, so I'm in tech, have always been in tech, but I'll also say that, tech has also kind of taken over everything else. So there's no longer really a thing called tech unless you get into certain spaces. But we look at founder market fit is what we call it. It's that personal connection that the person has to the market, being able to kind of tell that story in a way like, not only do I have not only am I compelled by your story, but also I get why you are the person to do it. And quite frankly, your solution and you go to market, all those things, we really just want to hear that you've thought about it. But there's a huge discount on life. Like, we know that these things are going to change. But it's really about you've thought through it, you got some conviction. And there's a huge component here of just, resilience and tenacity. When April, not to pick on April, but when she was pivoting during COVID, she had a live event in person, company that was the hardest hit industry when it comes to restaurants and happy hours. And she had to pivot, and the pivot was hard. It wasn't like it just happened overnight. And she just kind of showed that tenacity. And you see that, I think, with founders of color, because on one hand, it's really hard to kind of sort of raise that capital. Initially, we don't have aunts and uncles that can write those $50,000 checks that give you, your $250,000 kind of friends and family to hire folks to build a product. We're hustling. We're trying to figure out how do I just get this thing built so I can show the world my concept, my vision? So I think there's a level of tenacity and the product comes together from there. But to your point, so I'll stop there and say, reinforce that venture is not for everybody. So first of all, know what you're building and don't get lulled into the idea of, that venture capital is the only capital out there. One of the nice things about the region that we're in is access to small business loans, whether or not they be SBIRs from the various agencies that do that, is, there's a little bit more awareness around that in this area, but it's also great non-dilutive capital to get your product built. And so you have that, but don't get loaded into the thing of venture. But either way, whether it's venture or not venture, you have to tell a story, right? Like, be able to describe the market, tell it both with kind of anecdotal information, but to Melissa's point, also with numbers. Like, here's this problem, but it's a really big pain point that I bet you didn't know about. And then being able to back that up with why you, and then the rest kind of flows. Once you get them, kind of like that you had me at hello, once you get them on why this is a big problem and why I'm the person to do it, the rest of it just kind of falls out.
Nice. Well, I want to kick it to Jason next for his thoughts on any examples of founders that really make you kind of sit up. But Maurice, to your point around the founder market fit, I was talking to a founder, recently, helping them prepare for an investor pitch. They were in retail tech. They are in retail tech. And so the founder had been working in retail since 15, 16 years old. So think like Gap, Banana Republic, similar type of, environments, Target, all kind of stuff. And so never, ever in any part of their pitch, they talk about their experience growing up. They probably had 10 plus years of working in retail. It obviously had informed the problem they were working on, but they never mentioned it. I bring this up because I think this happens in many cases for diverse founders. I've seen it way too much in helping founders with pitches and seeing pitch competitions and pitch decks, is the translation between their lived experience, especially as a young person with having jobs, and then what they're working on right now. And so if they can say, I have 10 years of experience working in retail, I've seen this problem, boom, 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 now I'm solving it. I've seen that have a great effect on investors, accelerators, so on and so forth. And so that's one of the biggest gaps that I see. But Jason, wanted to kick it to you are there any founders in particular in how they did it that really capture your attention while you're talking to them?
Yeah, a couple things there. So I think the best founders focus on keeping customers happy rather than reaching out to us. So I mean, look at us as an example. We see 1,200 to 1,400 companies a year. We invest in 2 to 4.
Wow.
So, I mean, going back to yes, go after venture capital, in the state of Virginia, I'm on the board of CIT, which is another source of funding. So, they invest in companies as well, and I'm on their investment committee. But I think I look at and going back actually to your original thing, Joey, when you're like, hey, what do you like about DC? One of the really good thing about DC, if I'm giving the area props, is DC is really good about adopting technology of other local companies. And I see that happen out in the Bay Area really, really well. But the companies like in our portfolio, when we were an investor in Wedding Wire, Tim Chi and the whole management team there, if you're another local tech company, they're pretty much like an automatic. If there was a way to plug you in as a customer and try out your stuff, it would be almost be like an automatic, yeah, we're going to use you guys. And I think that's really important because investors like us like to see a path, and we like to see that there's quick adoption of customers. And so if you can get that to the magic is can you get to your first 10 customers? And we're heavy software investors. So can you find your first 10? But I think the important thing is happy customers, focus on the customers more than, the VCs out there, as much as my colleagues think they're important. I think going out there, one of the best stories I have is one of our founders that we invested in, a guy named Robin Smith. We backed 2 of his companies. His second company, he went out there before he raised capital. He went out there and he didn't have anything built. He got a customer to spend a little bit over $100,000 with him. and took that cash and early on, and they did that because they wanted to lock in preferred pricing with him. That the customer needed it that much. And so what that meant for Robin is he actually was able to raise less capital from firms like us, and which meant less dilution for him. So that, I think that's a great story. The other thing too, as far as like raising capital, is like, I know our space here where I sit in Durham, in our building, 40% of the startups in here are run by women or a person of color. And so they run like there are no, I feel like there are no walls here. Like people like knocking our glass, there are a lot of programs that they run all throughout the year, especially like pre-pandemic. They're getting back to that now. But I'll go up to the rooftop, grab beers with people. I just feel like it's a very, very social environment. And I think it's, we run office hours here as well. So anyone can walk in and talk to us about their idea. And I'll just say this too, like back to, I think Melissa mentioned it earlier, and I could listen to Melissa all day long. But I think like not every company should raise venture. And it's amazing, like the amount of companies out there, especially later stage, that we've tried to sell to, and they're not interested in taking our money. So again, like venture capital is not for everybody. And there's lots of great ways to build a business.
Nice.
Can I just piggyback on something he said around customers? I know, when I have started companies, especially early stages, not only are venture capital good for money, but I actually look at them as a channel where go and look at who are their portfolio companies that you may want to get to, because it is way easier if an investor tells a CEO, hey, I'm checking out this company, give me your perspective on it, right? And I know I've just gotten a lot of customers from doing that. So looking at them as like a channel partner. And then I think you brought up second time founder, like there's also just kind of this sort of the segmentation between first time founders and second time founders, right? Doing it for the first time, regardless of your background, it's tough. There's a lot more information available now to kind of get you up to speed, but there's also just a certain, sort of muscle memory you get from, being in the battlefield, trying to get your first customer, get that first investment, build that first team. And so second time, one thing I would also encourage people to do, if it's your first time, definitely talk to people who've done it before, what they would, what worked, what didn't work in their experience, and just try to see how you can accelerate getting your own muscle memory around it. Because, at least in venture raising capital, it's an opaque process, full of jargon, full of a bunch of landmines that you don't even know about, like things that, sort of trigger words that make investors like really kind of, pay attention, and trigger words that make him say like, I'm going to run for the hills. So just, get to know that as well. But the venture community isn't just about dollars, I guess is my point. Like you can really use them for some other resources.
Man, so that's a great point. I mean, we'll really only have about 10 to 14 minutes left. I actually want to ask the question, like, well, just if y'all could answer pretty quickly. The vast majority of diverse founders you all see in DC, are they first-time founders? Interesting. Okay, no, that's good. That's good. Very, very insightful. Quick, I want to hop over to Oz. I mean, relative to, rise of the rest a little bit. We'll through that lens, maybe in terms of written applications, right? So just generally speaking, I want to talk about written applications in the persona what it goes through for someone who may be doing an evaluation right now. Not sure how much evaluation you do on it, but maybe there's understanding of other folks as well. But generally speaking, I can share my experience when voting on Venture Atlanta. I've done stuff with South by Southwest and the panel picker there. It's, you get a few hundred applications, they say, hey, you have 4 to 6 weeks to evaluate. I'm busy. And let me start looking at 2 weeks out. Maybe it's a week out. Oh crap, I got a few days. So it's like, dating apps, right? You go just start, no, yes, no, yes, okay, maybe I'll come back to them. And that's what it kind of just boils down to, right? So the persona of the mindset of an evaluator, you're just deluged with a ton of applications. and you're looking for things that can quickly stand out. So I always kick it to you. Like, do you all see written applications? If so, how do people stand out?
Sure, I'll take that one. And given I'm on the growth team at Revolution, it's often a little bit later stage, so it's not usually an application. But I think a lot of the same themes hold true, whether it's in person, whether it's application or whatsoever. I would say on the actual application itself, I think just having some sort of clarity of thought around like just a handful of points you want to make on what you're doing today and what it could be. So businesses are all usually broken into team, product, and market. I think given it's a written application, team is a harder one to sell on beyond, telling your story and your background and why you're a fit for solving a certain problem. You can't really get that intangible there. So I think showing a pretty thorough analysis on why the market is ready for something like you, and then kind of backing that in sort of data, if you have traction, breaking it down in terms of traction, but then also being clear on what the challenges are, because I think a lot of people try to make it seem as if their idea is a no-brainer, and a lot of times that spooks investors because there's always some sort of obstacle, and that's why your company doesn't exist already. So using those as an opportunity to show that you're thoughtful around the obstacles and not that they don't exist. And then just on your point around dating apps, I think also outside the application process, sometimes it takes a while and investors forget things pretty frequently. So trying to find other channels, whether it's a cold email or anything else to give consistent updates. You may not get a response, but showing that tenacity outside of, I guess, the structured application process is super helpful, I think. I think for diverse founders, it can be difficult to break through. You rarely can get that warm intro or anything of that nature, but I would still encourage people to try and give some periodic updates to just increase that likelihood.
Yeah. I mean, there's tremendous value even being in meetings like this, right? Someone sees a name, an attendee, you see their information come across, even it's a month, 2 months, 3 months later, rings a bell, you get a further look. I don't know, Melissa, Maurice, even Jason, any thoughts on how founders can stick out from a written perspective?
I just say answer the question. And I don't say that to be mean. We have the privilege to have a partnership with New Voices, the foundation and the fund. And so we actually run all their pitch competitions that are focused on women of color across the United States. I cannot tell you how many times the entrepreneur does not answer the question. I would say over this past year, we've done 3 competitions. So we probably read over 3,000 applications. And the first thing I go through is, I don't care who you are, where you're from, can you accurately describe what you do? And oftentimes they want to tell me nothing personal. You want to tell me a life story. You want to tell me how you came to be. Just answer the question, because if they kept going, there's plenty of time for us to hear about you personally. But I don't fault them, but I give that as a trick, because I think, having also judged for South by Southwest, I know judges saying, if I don't see the answers, I'm not looking for them. And I think the challenge is, particularly Black women, but I think Black entrepreneurs are all over, we don't get a lot of spaces and places. So this is awesome, Joey, but we don't get a lot of spaces and places to talk. So when people have the chance, they think they have to tell you every possible thing about their journey because you've never heard of them, and there is no context. And so I hope those who put together applications can say, like, here's all the questions you're going to get. Like, don't cram all into one, and then help people. But then 2, that entrepreneurs realize, while it's a competition or whatever it is they're looking for, you'll have a chance, God willing, if you're selected, to tell your story. But right now, just answer the questions, because to your point, right, we're all South by Southwest, we have to read like 110 applications. I don't have a chance to honestly remember everybody. So I need you to stand out. I need to know that first box where you get to describe your company, you are 150% aligned with whatever the competition or the program is looking for. And then another, tell me all about yourself, which is compelling. But as judges, I have a job to make the best match to what the competition is looking for. And too often it's like, word 3,000 that I finally figured that out. And I'm like, yeah, forget it. And it's sad to say, but we don't have a lot of time. We usually get a couple of days to review these. And so do yourself a favor and just stick to the questions, and know that you will get a chance at some point in time to tell somebody your entire story.
Yeah. I know, Jason or Maurice, any additional thoughts on that?
Well, I don't have a lot of experience sort of reading pitch competition applications, but I will say that less is more. but not just about brevity, but like saying it with impact right away. Sort of with the expression of, sorry about the long letter, I didn't have time to make it shorter. You can kind of tell the maturity of an entrepreneur in a business by how concisely they get to the point, right? So when I see emails or pitches come in, the more words that are on a page tells me, signals to me that, oh, they haven't really had time to bake this thing. It's like, it's more of an idea. It's not as developed because they can't tell it to me succinctly. And that may be a bias that I've developed over the years, but I find that it's a correlation that, the more you know, the less you have to say.
I love it. I love it. I want to, as we have only a few more minutes left, any questions from you all, drop them in chat, hit the raise your hand feature here in Zoom. And we'll make sure we get to them. Let's start talking about, and again, we only have a few more minutes. In closing, I want to kick it to you, Melissa. One, eventually, if you could just say, how can people get in contact with you? I think you dropped some information in chat, but any closing thoughts? Anything you want? Is there a charge for DC Diverse Found DC the DMV DC area? I'm sorry,
No, it's all good, brother. DC. Right, DC is only but this big, so we gotta join forces with everybody around us. I think the biggest thing is keep doing what you're doing. Any entrepreneur who started a business here in DC, we're definitely not Silicon Valley. We're definitely not Atlanta, because Chocolate City is becoming more mocha or latte. And so I think we just got to band together and stay resilient. And I know people like me, and you can email me at melissa@1863ventures.net. You be like, Maurice, I would say there's a ton of us who have come together around this kind of Black VC DMV chapter, who are not doing this because we got a bunch of time, but we're doing it because we recognize that we need to get more Black investors in the space. And that's because we see an ever growing number of Black entrepreneurs. So I would say stay focused, continue to be resilient, reach out to those of us who are here, because we do have connections across. Do not be afraid to reach out. And the final thing is, get connected to a community. I think that, entrepreneurship is a team sport. Together, everybody achieves more. We now do have a base of entrepreneurs who've been doing this for 5, 10 plus years, and we've got those who've been doing less than 5 months. And I think there's a lot that can be learned on both sides from those entrepreneurs. So I think the final thing I would say is find a community and make it work for you, but also be willing to give back. I think that's the other thing about DC is that we truly look out for each other. I know ATL does as well, but we truly look out for each other and care about each other and can call on personal, professional stuff. And so get connected, because I think that'll be a huge lift to your company.
Nice. Maurice?
Yeah, everything Melissa said, the hustle is real, keep at it. Only thing I would add is the kind of the mindset is also a big deal. You can get burned out really easily. How do you sort of get reinvigorated after so many no's? I'd say that, it's not a one company game, right? Like, Chris, who's on the phone, I don't know, what are you on, company 5 or 6 or something like that now? It's not, you play it forward, right? So what you'll learn here will go to something else, or if you're hitting walls here, there may be a pivot down the line. So don't get stressed, don't get discouraged because things don't look like a clear path today. Half the battle is being in the game and showing up every day, open-minded but committed.
Nice. Oz?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of what Melissa and Maurice were already saying. I think a big mantra for me is pay it forward, and I think that the community we've built with whether it's Black VC or any other organization within DC is that this is like a passion project. We want to see people succeed for the pure reason of seeing them succeed. So anytime that you get that chance or that at bat, like if I get a job at Revolution and then I now have an advantage point to let people talk to our seeds fund, even though I'm a growth investor, I take every chance I get to do that. But if I do that for you, you should challenge yourself to do the same thing. So I just think that that's the only way that you sort of grow that network. And then the second thing also Maurice touched on was just a part of what's made Silicon Valley work is the culture around failure and what it actually means. Like people don't think about it as failure. So that willingness to challenge yourself, to chase an opportunity and then see value in it, no matter the outcome, to then and go try again is something that I think psychologically is different in different cities. And I think just remembering that a lot of the best stories aren't people that thought of one idea and it worked. It was an iteration, and eventually it was one that worked, and they couldn't even tell you how it worked. And so having that humility and that willingness to take the risk is like half the battle, versus thinking you need to sound like an expert, whether it's to be successful or to raise money or anything in the above. So those would be like my 2 points.
Excellent points. Excellent. Jason?
Yeah, I think the other thing I'll mention is, hey, persistence wins. And the other thing I'll mention is, because I know we're almost out of time here, is that I think everyone put down all the speakers put down their email addresses. So, as you have follow-up questions, don't be afraid to email any of us for help.
Nice. I know there's a question that came in. Melissa, I'll direct this to you. Melanie from Minwo was asking, how to plug into the start of community organizations, events, and stuff like that in the DMV.
Well, first of all, I want to give a shout out to Melanie and what she's doing with her company. She's killing it over there. I would say reach out. Call me, call Maurice, or email us, email Oz. I think depending on what you're looking for, there's lots of formal, but probably more informal. I think some of them are sector specific as well. So you've got a local chapter of Black female founders. You've got what else we got a few others that are around. So I'd say email me or email Maurice or Oz, and I will definitely make sure I know we have a list somewhere.
Awesome, we'll do. Thanks.
Maurice, you have anything you would add?
Yeah, we've got, definitely email me. We've got this kind of informal group called the Black Exchange that several people on the call are a part of. And welcoming, entrepreneurs. It's kind of a small group format, call it an accountability group, but it's an exchange of ideas and of sort of helping one another keep it moving.
Nice. And for those of us watching on YouTube or LinkedIn and Facebook, we'll make sure you get access to these resources as well. Okay, so we're right just about at time, but I want to say two things, and I think my friends at the Chamber, Metro Atlanta Chamber, would back me up here. We want to be intentional around creating a bridge, an exchange, so to speak, between Atlanta and DC. So let's definitely work on that. I think Venture Atlanta is a perfect avenue to do so. Two, founders watching here on Zoom, but also across the rest of the web. We highly encourage you all to apply to Venture Atlanta. Go to ventureatlanta.org. Applications are due by August 6th. And if you'd like, we are more than willing to give you feedback, especially diverse founders, on your application. So you can go there, find the application questions, create a Google Doc, share it with us, share it with me in particular, and a few others, and we'll get your feedback. And so we'll send an email out to those that registered on how to get in contact with us, and go from there. So again, this is an intentional effort to make sure everyone is prepared for not only Venture Atlanta, but just accelerators, pitch showcases, also investor meetings as well. And so we hope you take advantage. So everyone, keep safe out there. Keep doing what you're doing. Outwork yesterday. This is super awesome. And we look forward to everyone descending on the DC, the DMV area, moving forward. Peace out, y'all.
Thanks for doing this.
You're welcome. This is awesome.
Thank you all. Stay safe.
Appreciate you, Maurice.
Hey, appreciate it, man. Hit you up on LinkedIn. Hadil, thanks for bringing me in. Chris,